Good evening and a very warm welcome to Radio and Television Tonga News Package for the hour. Making headlines, New Zealand Foreign Affairs Minister Nanaia Mahuta launched this morning the Aotearoa New Zealand's Climate Change Finance Strategy. Speaker of Parliament meets the chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress of China. And the Asian Development Bank posts monetary assistance to the Pacific, including Tonga. We'll have these and more stories later on in the bulletin, including the latest sports news. Now for the stories in detail. The Aotearoa New Zealand Climate Change Finance Strategy was officially launched here in Nuku'alofa this morning by the New Zealand Foreign Affairs Minister Nanaia Mahuta. This is part of Aotearoa New Zealand's Climate Commitment 2022-2025, as announced in October last year, that New Zealand is committed to spend 1.3 billion in grant-based climate finance between 2022-2025. This underlines the importance of New Zealand attaching to global and regional efforts to work together to combat climate change. Her Excellency stated in her address this morning that at least half of this climate finance commitment will support Pacific Island countries and at least 50% will target adaptation.
This strategy is designed to guide our 1.3 billion commitment of climate finance investments between 2022 and 2025. At least 50% of this commitment will be directed towards the Pacific, with a key focus on adaptation. By more than quadrupling our previous climate finance commitment, we have an opportunity to act at scale for maximum climate impact. The strategy's vision allows us to be innovative in seeking creative mitigation and adaptation initiatives, take managed risks and invest for the long term. Looking at projects to promote biodiversity, protect the oceans and safeguard delicate ecosystems. It encourages us to build enduring partnerships with research institutions in the Pacific and beyond, supporting the transfer of knowledge, data, and Indigenous practices and techniques. It provides a framework to strengthen our climate finance influence and impact by working inclusively to ensure equity of benefits and transformative change. This includes the advancement of human rights of Indigenous peoples, women, those with disabilities of diverse sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression and sex characteristics, children and youth, and other marginalised groups through integration into our design work. And it empowers and enables the voices of these priority groups to act and inform inclusive decision-making in the design and delivery of our climate finance initiatives. It ensures capability strengthening approaches that are inclusive of those who will inherit the guardianship of our planet, our children, our mokopuna, and beyond.
Her Excellency also announced an 8 million pa'anga assistance to our Tongan Climate Change Fund. Also at today's program was a Q&A session between Her Excellency and local stakeholders on climate change. New Zealand's financial support is delivered through a range of partners and modalities, including direct development assistance and Pacific regional organizations, with a core focus on climate change and multilateral organization and programs with strategic focus on climate change, such as the Green Climate Fund and the Global Environment Facility. And therefore, the launching of the strategy comes at the right time when both government and non-government organizations are striving to facilitate awareness programs to address climate change in Tonga. On that development, respective representatives of all sectors of this finance fund strategy were at Ancient Tonga this afternoon displaying booths presenting Her Excellency their various roles and responsibilities. These organizations are namely Moti Tonga, Tonga National Youth Congress, National Emergency Management Office and the Social Protection Unit of the Internal Affairs Ministry. The Lord Speaker of the Legislative Assembly of Tonga, Lord Fafanua, held a high-level bilateral meeting with the chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress of China, Li Shen-su, on Wednesday. This meeting is a defining moment in the relations between the two countries. Mark Ake tells you more.
The Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, Lord Fafanua, was pleased to affirm that Tonga continues to recognize the One China policy and respect for the One China principle that will continue to take it as the bedrock for advancing the Tonga-China bilateral relations. Lord Fafanua told the chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, or NPC, Lee Zan-shu, that Tonga maintains its friends to all and enemies to none foreign policy as Tonga continues to respect each nation's sovereignty. He added this year has been extremely difficult for the government and Parliament of Tonga, from the devastation caused by the Hunga-Hapai volcanic eruption and tsunami to the community outbreak of COVID-19. Lee said that the rapid development of the China-Tonga Comprehensive Strategic Partnership had brought tangible benefits to the two peoples. China will further develop ties with Tonga amid joint efforts to build a closer China-Pacific Island countries community with a shared future. He called for enhanced mutual political trust and support, as well as more cooperation in the economy, trade, investment, infrastructure, culture, and tourism. Chairman Lee said China, Tonga, and other Pacific Island countries are all developing countries, adding that China hopes Tonga can actively support and partake in the global security initiative and jointly safeguard international fairness and justice.
The Asian Development Bank has boosted the monetary assistance for the Pacific countries from $18 billion to $100 billion, with the intention of building resilience to the climate change that we face today and may face in the future. Mark Ake again with more on this story.
In 2020, Tropical Cyclone Harold hit the Pacific, unleashing torrential rains and floods which severely affected infrastructure, vital services, and livelihoods, just as the region was starting to deal with the global outbreak of COVID-19. In advance of COP26 last year, the Asian Development Bank announced it was raising its ambition for climate finance from its own resources for 2019 to 2030 from $80 billion to $100 billion. Of that, ADB announced $34 billion would be for adaptation, signaling a new emphasis to strengthening resilience in the region. This strengthened focus on adaptation has already had an effect for countries like Tonga, one of the most disaster-prone countries in the world. In 2020, the Asian Development Bank and the government of Tonga commissioned a multi-hazard climate and disaster risk assessment that analyzed thousands of buildings, roads, power, and water assets in Tongatapu. A risk index was developed from the assessment, which showed areas in Tongatapu at high risk to the impacts of climate change and therefore prone to frequent or permanent flooding. The report also showed relatively safe areas that could become home to some resilient communities.
Tonga police have received reports of student brawls in Nuku'alofa. These incidents occurred as school resumes to normal. Reports says that alcohol may be a contributing factor, while some scuffles are instigated by youth who are no longer in school. Alice Tupo with the details.
Tonga Police is working closely with principals and prefects to revive the police prefects after school patrols, with the aim of achieving increased police presence at targeted areas. Police urge parents and guardians to also play their role in making sure that their children are not involved in such mindless actions and conduct. Tonga Police in a statement explained that it does not tolerate any of this unacceptable behavior, as it is a public concern and a disturbance to community peace and safety. The Chief Superintendent Commander of Tongatapu District, Filipe Fifita, says that youth and students should always think twice. It costs nothing to be nice or be an instrument of peace, while brawls, on the other hand, not only is a direct violation of the law likely to result in police arrest, but also they need to consider the negative record against their character and, more importantly, potential injury and life threats. Reporting for Radio and Television Tonga News, I'm Alice Tupo.
And Tonga's High Commissioner to Australia, Her Royal Highness Princess Angelica Latu welcomed the Ambassador of Ecuador, His Excellency Victor Cabrera, as they looked at ways that Tonga and Ecuador can establish in diplomatic ties. The two discussed how Tonga can learn from Ecuador on ways of protecting nature, traditional plants, and also the historical sites. Alice Tupo has more.
The two discussed how Tonga can learn from Ecuador on ways of protecting nature, traditional plants, and also the historical sites. Ecuador is a country in the northwest of South America, bordered by Colombia on the north, Peru on the east and south, and the Pacific Ocean on the west. There is hope that this conversation between Tonga and Ecuador will establish diplomatic ties soon. Meanwhile, the ambassador of Austria to Tonga hosted a special Austrian dinner in honor of Her Royal Highness Princess Angelica Latu, Tonga's High Commissioner to Australia. Invited guests include the Honorary Consul General of Tonga, Louise Waterhouse, also federal member for Canberra, the Honourable Alicia Payne, and other guests. Reporting for Radio and Television Tonga News, I'm Alice Tupo.
That is the latest from local scenes with Tonga Development Bank.
Tonga Development Bank does not charge you levy for using its currency exchange or DD services.
Sports is up next with Mark Ake, proudly sponsored by Pacific Timber and Hardware.
The groundbreaking ceremony to kick off the construction of the Tonga Football Association Stadium was held yesterday at Loto, Tonga. The Tonga Football Association president, Lord Ve'ehala, was present at the event as the guest of honor. The TFA Secretary Louis Aho said that the construction of the stadium has been a dream of Lord Ve'ehala and the association's executive since 2017. The stadium will have a capacity of over 500 seats. The stadium will include changing rooms for the teams, as well as media and internet facilities, a canteen, a referee room, 4 changing rooms, a medical room for doctors and medics, night lights, a parking area, and of course, an international pitch. Dexing Construction Limited will carry out the construction project. Construction is expected to take 12 to 18 months and is estimated to be worth 8.6 million pa'anga, with funding from a collection of money that was saved by the association since 2017. Also present at the event was the CEO of the Ministry of MEDEC, who was also the Senior Vice President of the TFA, Paula.
That wraps up this evening's news package, but before we part, here's one final look at today's top stories. New Zealand Foreign Affairs Minister Nanaia Mahuta launched this morning the Aotearoa New Zealand's Climate Change Finance Strategy. Speaker of Parliament meets with the chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress of China. And the Asian Development Bank posts their monetary assistance to the Pacific, including Tonga. And that's it for tonight. Thank you for your company. I'm Paula. Good evening.